Shrija Taleti, and I'm hosting Voice for You. And this is Saran. How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you? Hi, everyone.
How's the weather out there?
It's very great.
Sunny California. Okay, so let me introduce you. Saran is the first Mongolian-American appointed commissioner. She graduated as her school's valedictorian with a remarkable weighted GPA of 4.9. She's now a freshman at Rice University majoring social policy and analysis. She's a National Youth Fellow for the U.S. Department of Labor, where she represents more than 3.5 million teens with disabilities all over the country. She's also a National Youth Policy Accelerator, where she promotes mental health, well-being, and condition prevention. She's currently also working as a youth advisor at the California Alliance of Child and Family Services, who stands up as a leading voice for groups that support children, youth, and families by helping shape better policies and services for them. Her impact even extends internationally, making her a bold and rising force in advocacy and leadership. So, tell me about yourself, like your hobbies, your interests, and your passions.
Of course. So, hi, everyone. My name's Saran Tusjargal, and it's such a pleasure to be here today and talk with you guys about who I am and just everything in general about myself. And yeah, I guess a little bit about me is, so I am a first generation in my family to go to college. So I'm an incoming freshman at Rice University, which I'll be starting next week. I'm very excited for that. I mean, it's a very exciting journey that I'm excited to embark on. I received a full ride Quest Spread scholarship. This year? Yes, this year. So I'm very happy about that. I'm very excited. I plan to study on social policy analysis, and political science with a minor in data science around those areas, because policy is my biggest home to me. It's where I thrive socially, emotionally, academically, and career-wise. I'm really excited for that. And moving on, my interests include as policy, social welfare, education, international relations, because I think that a lot of my interests do connect to, they all interconnect to one to another. So I'm really excited to continue to do work in that and explore those paths of college. My hobbies, so I love to go rock climbing. I'm a certified belayer, so I love climbing with my friends and love climbing with my peers. That's a very huge, one of my favorite hobbies I like to do. My other one is I like to play golf. I used to do varsity golf throughout high school, and I really enjoy golf. So another thing is I love to go outside, go on walks, watch sunset with friends, and watch sunset with family. Another is spending time with family. I think that's really important to me because I think family is one of my core beliefs, and I really enjoy my time with being family a lot. And a little about who I am. So I'm Mongolian, I'm Mongolian, but I'm also an American. I'm Mongolian-American. I have multiple disabilities, so I'm neurodivergent. I'm a neurodivergent student. So yeah, I guess that's a little bit about who I am. So yeah.
Okay. So what do you think led you to this line of work? Like, you were talking about you're going to Rice University and you're going to study social policy analysis. What do you think led you to that?
I think what led me to that is actually a lot of my extracurriculars. But before my extracurriculars, it was actually my problem and my challenges growing up. So I'm sure you probably know at a very young age, I'm sure you've heard the question where someone will ask you, what do you want to be when you grow up? Honestly, that's the question that I got asked so many times when I was very little, and I was like, I don't even know what I want to be when I grow up. I didn't even know until middle school or whatever, and I was like, I don't know, I want to be a singer, I want to be I don't know. I used to say a lot of random things because I really did not know what I wanted to grow up. Actually, a lot of it is I found a lot about myself throughout my childhood. And I found a lot through myself through a lot of the traumas and the challenges I'd been through. So when I was very little, I was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. And that kind of affected me a little. That affected me throughout my childhood. And I was diagnosed with learning disabilities. And that affected me as well. And I think that from a very young age, I experienced a lot of issues, like bullying growing up. I suffered from that. I suffered from a lot of other issues, like being impacted by systems. And I mean, often being a Mongolian person and coming from a country that does not know, coming from a family that does not have proficient English was always a struggle, because often like my parents would try their best to advocate for me in school, but sometimes like they were pushed away, or they would just be told like, your daughter is the problem, she's the one who caused this. And my parents would be like, but we need support, we want help. But they would never be understood, because often translation services in Mongolian was never like offered. Like that did not even exist. So it was very hard to see growing up. A lot of the times, like for me, it's like I would be like, while my peers are outside playing with their friends, doing fun activities, I would be sometimes in the resource room, which is like an academic room for students with disabilities to get academic support. I'd be in there for most of the time studying or working on like my school goals or academic goals. And I was often very segregated from my peers because of my disabilities and because I was labeled as I needed help. And more of that, often it's like I didn't have access to a lot of opportunities or access to a lot of programs because it wasn't fit for me. Like I was labeled as, you don't really belong here in a school like this, or you don't belong with us. That was a type of feeling that I got throughout my childhood. That really affected me. And often like I would get really low test scores on some tests, and I remember some kids found out in my class when I was little, and they would bully me. They would say some really hurtful comments. They'd be like, oh, you're really dumb. I think opposite people are going to be very dumb like you, and you're never going to be successful, and things like that. And that really affected me growing up. Often, like, I would go to my teachers for like, hey, I need help with this, or like, hey, like, this is happening to me, some kids are bothering me, and things like that. But often my teachers didn't like meet with respect with me. They didn't really care too much about me. They kind of just said, you're the problem. I think you're the one who caused it. Like, there's no reason why other kids would be doing this to you if you caused it yourself. And that really affected me growing up as well. It's like being treated as you're the problem, then really trying to understand like what's causing this. Like, why am I crying? Why am I having mental breakdowns? Why can I not do this? Things like that. So growing up, I felt very secluded. I was segregated, I was secluded, I was voiceless. And that really affected me. And I think throughout my childhood, I used to like come home every single day and I would just cry to my mom and I'd be like, why do I have this disability? Why am I like this? Like, I would just cry to her and be like crying, because it's like, I just felt like I never really belonged and I never really had friends. I never really had that. And it really kind of like, it affected me really badly. My mom would be like, oh, it's okay. Like, your disability is not supposed to impact your life this way. Like, you're meant to be, you're someone special and you are not supposed to go through things like this. From that point, I used to just feel like I don't like my disability. I just want to be normal. And I remember saying this to myself when I was 7. I was like, my childhood dream is just to be a normal kid, just to be treated as normal. But as I went on throughout my elementary, middle school, I found my passion in leadership. I became the youngest person in my school to ever run for like associated student body elections against some high schoolers, and I actually won in my 7th grade year. So I became very involved in leadership because I wanted to show people that no matter how young you are, no matter your disability, you can do anything what's possible. So I guess I did that. So I found my passions in leadership and beyond. And then in high school, I became a caregiver. And that's how things really changed. So as I was the beginning of my freshman year, I went back to Mongolia to take care of my grandma. And as I did, I remember she asked me this before she passed away from cancer. She asked me like, hey, can you raise like 2 twin boys, your cousins? And I was like, you're actually crazy. That's like literally what I said, because that's actually a crazy thing to ask a 14-year-old. So I became a caregiver. So I said yes. So I brought them to the United States with my parents. I raised them with them, but their school's like right next to mine. So I would be constantly going back and forth. I'd go to the classrooms, talking to their teachers and things like that. Things I've never really done before because of my trauma, and things I've like never wanted to do. And to me, like, I wasn't just advocating for me, I was advocating for them. And that was very difficult for me because it forced me to like speak up with teachers, thing that I'm not the best at. I had to advocate for myself, which I'm not the best at either. I had to learn a lot of these skills. And then I realized what I was going through as a very young child, they were going through. So it was very hard to see. them not being understood by their parents, them being labeled as they're the problem, even though they didn't have a disability, but they were labeled as they're the problem because they were an ELD. They didn't speak English proficiently. Their language was Mongolian, and they're learning to speak English, so it was very difficult for them. Often, like, they would get into fights with their peers, or often they would get in arguments with their teachers because they just couldn't understand. And I would be the person sometimes skipping my tests or, like, canceling my meetings just to go to help them out. And that really reminded me, and that really, like, kind of demonstrated a lot in my school. Like, my schools was, like, people at my school, the directors of my special education team were like, hey, Saran, you should apply for this program. You should apply to become a student commissioner. And I was like, I don't know if I should do that yet. I don't know. But they kind of saw that passion in me, like, not advocating for myself, but being able to advocate for immigrant families, people of color, and so much more. And they thought that I could be a voice for hundreds of thousands of kids. So I did. And then I got the news in my junior year of high school in the fall that I was appointed to be a student commissioner for the California Department of Education Advisory Commission on Special Education, where I represent over 850,000 students with disabilities across California. And I remember finding out, just tears streaming down my cheeks. I was like, oh my God, I made it this far. I can't believe I'm doing something so big. Because to me, that role didn't mean just to be a student commissioner. It meant that I am the first Mongolian-American official in the United States. And because there was no Mongol leaders for me to look up to when I was very little, there was no one who had the same issues as me, no one who looked like the same me, no one from my same culture. And I realized it had to be someone who could stand up, and I realized it could be me. So I became the first, not the Mongolian-American official, but the first Mongolian leader for many Mongolian youth with disabilities can look up to, many Mongolian girls to look up to, and many people that who can look up to. So I became the first in that, and it was a very proud moment. So then I became a very powerful advocate in special education advocacy, education, and social welfare. I've done a lot, and that's kind of how it led me to positions, and how my challenges, my personal stories, my lived experiences, how I use that to transform me into the leader I am today. And that's how I kind of, in my current positions now as a student commissioner, which the term is going to be ending soon, sadly, but it was a 2-year term, but I'm excited. I've kind of went up to different levels. I'm working on national, international levels. So I've kind of learned how to, like, keep continuing to fight for people at different levels. But yeah.
I think that's very inspirational that you kind of prove people it doesn't matter if you have disabilities or you're young. You can still do the same things as other people. I think that's really, really inspirational. What's one misconception people have about youth with disabilities that you wish more people understood?
I think one of the biggest conceptions that a lot of youth with disabilities get is that there's so many of them, but that you're intellectually behind. I think that one's a really big one. I think why it's because, like, when people see someone who's different, someone who is disabled, they're going to think, oh, you are someone who's very behind in academics. You may not have skill sets as your peers and things like that. And I think that really causes negative connotations against peers and perceptions about people with disabilities, and that really affects people growing up. Because for me, like, a lot of people thought that about me, like when I had very low test scores in my elementary school, and I accidentally, like, left on the floor, and my friends saw that and things like that, and people would have that conception of saying, oh, your misconception of, oh, you are a dumb student, basically. And that really affected me. And I feel like what people should do is never judge someone by the book its cover. Never judge someone by who they are. Just because someone's disabled, just because someone who looks different, doesn't mean that they're intellectually behind or anything. It doesn't mean that. It just means that everyone is different and everyone's on their different paths. Because not everyone is meant to be a certain person. Not everyone is meant to be like, oh, I want to become this and this. Everyone has very different paths, and everyone's at a different range of success. And I think that that's a really powerful way to look at it. And I wish that people can just never judge people by the book its cover, or never judge people the minute you meet someone, or things like that.
So can you share what it means to you to be one of the first Mongolian-American serving in a U.S. government appointed role?
Excuse me, can you just say that one more time?
Can you share what it means for you to be the first Mongolian-American serving in a U.S. government-appointed role?
It's very exciting. It's very powerful. It's a lot, actually. And I think that ever since I got into this role, I've had a lot of Mongolians. I have a lot of Mongolians who come from various backgrounds. They would come to me, they would just see me as an inspiration, and a lot of people would see me as inspiration or like the powerful force of this country and things like that. And I think that really moves me in some ways. And I think that realizing that I am someone's leader, I can do a lot for people and I can continue to advocate for people and their needs. Because one of my core beliefs as a leader is being selfless. I put people before I do, which is a good thing and a bad thing, but I see it as a very good thing for me. But really understanding, like, how can I support my communities? Because I was once in that community. I suffered a lot. I went through those systematic barriers. And I know that I don't want to see people like me go through those same systematic barriers, and how can I help them? So being a very powerful advocate for them, helping them fight through them, getting them the support they need, the access they need, because unfortunately, the United States has an inequality problem. We have an accessibility problem. So really helping people find access to supports, helping them find their voices and things like that. So I think that's it's very powerful for me, but it's very powerful for them that they have an advocate for someone they can look up to and they can use as a resource. And I think that this isn't just the beginning. I think that there's going to be more and more firsts and more representation in governments, sports, and so much more of other sectors.
So, as a National Youth Fellow for the U.S. Department of Labor, what initiatives are you most excited for the next 5 years?
So as a National Youth Fellow for the U.S. Department of Labor for ODEP, which is the Office Department of Employment, Disability Employment Policy, well, I'm really excited to really focusing on like initiatives on like mental health, connections with employment, because I think that there's so many youth with disabilities in the United States that don't really have a job because of their disability. And I get to work with different states the next four-ish years, I believe, because I already did my first year. The next 4 years helping these youth with disabilities working with state officials to like develop programs to like create employment initiatives, employment programs for students with disabilities. And I have this passion in like mental health area, so figuring out like how mental health is correlated with employment policy, but also like how can we help youth with disabilities who are those in juvenile halls maybe get employed and things like that. So like really looking at different aspects and initiatives, how I can help states and work with these state legislators and policymakers in the next few years. I'm still exploring a lot of my interests, but those are the things that I'm really passionate about, and I'm really excited to see how that really goes and see how it goes.
You're representing over 800,000 students with disabilities across California. What are some of the biggest challenges they face, and how are you working to address them?
That's a very good question, and a question that I get asked a lot these days. I guess one of the biggest issues was my first step is making my first step in that room and big policy spaces. Like sometimes I'm walking in spaces where there's usually 99% of the time they're usually adults. I'm talking about politicians, I'm talking about big name doctors, big name practitioners, we're talking about big name people basically. And I'm usually the only youth in those rooms. And it's very intimidating, I guess. And it's very like there's a power imbalance sometimes walking in. And there's just so much stuff going in, but you're kind of like you're going into those spaces without kind of like not knowing, because you are different, you are young, you have different experiences than these individuals. And I think that for me, it was kind of difficult the first few times walking into spaces where there's only adults. But what I've done is I've reminded myself that I deserve to be in these spaces. I was appointed to be a reason. I have a goal for a reason. I have people to serve. But most importantly, it's important that I own up these spaces because my voice at these tables matter. And often in these government settings and these capacities, these voices are not really heard in these capacities. Often our policymakers are building systems without our voices. They think they know what's happening in our communities, but often they don't know that. Because it's like, sometimes I'd be asking, it's like, you've been in the education system for what? For 20 years? But your experiences in the system that you grew up in is completely different than what many youth are facing now, because what you were born 20-ish years ago, and a lot of us were born in the 20th century. So it's very different. So really I've learned to ask the hard questions. I put myself up there. I stand up for myself, and really asking the hard questions have let me grow, but also letting adults grow and enabling them to learn and grow as they continue with policymaking. That's really important.
Role do you think community and collaboration played in shaping your achievements and your passion?
Community and
Collaboration.
I think that collaboration was one of the things that I stand a lot to, because I feel like that when we don't collaborate with each other, we're never going to get things done. We're never going to get work done, and I think that's a very valid thing that I see a lot. Sometimes, I'm sitting in a chair, and I'm watching all of these presentations go, but often, when these presentations go, it's like, where's the collaboration? Who are we meeting with? Why are we not meeting with this person? Why are we not meeting with this person? Things like that. So it's like me thinking, how can we really collaborate? Because often, when you see very similar interests of people, sharing career interests and things like that, I see the power of connection. The power of connection enables us to addressing world issues, addressing the issues that we have, the issues that we face in our communities today. So a lot of my work is focused on, how do we connect with each other? And how do we connect people and each other through our communities? And I think that in our communities, when we hear from our communities, when we speak to our community, we learn so much about it, because often they're impacted by the systems themselves. Often, if you don't hear from the marginalized communities, then how are we going to develop the system for them? How are we going to develop them without their voices? You exactly cannot. However, we do, that's the issue. So the way how we address this is about how do we collaborating with nonprofits, organizations that work with those communities. And what I like to do is I like to connect people. I like to connect those groups together. A lot of the work that I do is I talk with a lot of the communities that I represent with. I ask them for their inputs, their ideas, what should I work on as an appointed body, a member of this body? What kind of work do you want me to focus on? Ultimately, I serve the people. I don't serve politicians, and I serve the people. And that's the core thing that I stand on very hardly, is if I serve the people, then my focus is collaboration, is fighting and working for the people and making that systems really work for them. And that's how it led me to my accomplishments. So one of my biggest accomplishments is I had 3 bills signed into law. The first bill was providing medical coverage for those PANS and PANDAS, which is a chronic autoimmune illness, basically. And we had that signed into law in 2025. The other bill was creating an IEP template that works for special education families and their youth. That bill got signed into law as well. The other one was, what was the other one? Oh yes, it was changing emotional disturbance to emotional disability. That's something that I was actually on throughout my childhood. So that bill also got signed into law. So I had 3 bills signed into law. Due to my collaboration, due to my advocacy, due to that, I was actually speaking with my community, and I was actually working with organizations, county officials, and state officials to get these bills signed into law. So I guess that's how it led me to my accomplishments, if that makes sense. Because I think that collaboration community is very important when you want things to happen.
So, as you look into the future, what legacy do you hope to create through your work in leadership and advocacy?
As I look into my future, which I don't know where I plan to be. In the future, I plan to continue doing this work, because I feel like that once you're in this work, it's important that you keep going and you keep pushing and keep driving, because in a time like this, there's so much going on in our world. There's so much going on in the United States. There's so much going on in the world. And there's a lot of uncertainty every single day you see. I don't let that scare me. I don't let it overwhelm me. But I tell myself that I keep on going and keep on going for my passions and my dreams, my goals and aspirations. And the legacy that I want to leave for future youth is that let them take up spaces, let them take those risks, let them grow. But most importantly, let them be the ones, let them own up spaces, because this is our future. This is their future, and it's important that you act on it, and it's important that you lead on it, and it's important that you own those spaces, because sometimes, and now it feels like there's so much going on, and there's so much happening in government, there's so much happening in front of you, and if you don't act upon it, and if you don't do a lot, if you don't do what you can, it's going to feel more overwhelming. And I believe that there's going to be many firsts in everything that we do. There's going to be firsts government, there's going to be firsts in all different types of sectors. So I'm really excited to see that and grow. And another legacy that I do hope that I leave is that show young people is that their age should never be a barrier to what they're able to do. Many people look at me, they're like, oh my God, you've done so much at a young age. And I'm like, yes, I've done a lot at a young age, but age is not a barrier to me. I don't look at my age. I like to think of myself as that I'm a human being just like you. I've experienced just like you, and I am able to do so much more. And to continue to show young people that your age and your disability should never be a barrier to what you're able to do, because you can do it no matter what. So yeah.
What's a project or initiative you're currently working on that excites you the most?
So actually a project and initiative that I'm working on right now is actually, okay. So I'm not like super like involved in it, but like I'm working on it. I'm working on it right now with a lot of educators and policymakers, and it's the full IDA Act. So that is a bill, and that's introduced in Congress right now. Basically, the full IDA, which stands for Individual Education Plan, basically. Disabilities Education Plan. Basically what this is, it's like, for many years, this bill has been to Congress, and Congress has not given money to fully fund IDA. And many students with disabilities across the United States rely on disability services, special education accommodations, and things like that. And that goes under the IDA. The thing is, IDA has never been fully funded. So that's the issue. Congress has never fully funded IDA yet. And in order for students with disability to just strive and thrive in academics and thrive in schools, is that we need that money, because money is basically the backbone of every education system. So that's a project I'm working on, is with policymakers, legislators, and working with educators. So hopefully that Congress actually passes this bill and actually makes this happen, because we need this for our students with disabilities in the education system. And actually I'm proud to announce is that the full IDA funding bill that we submitted, the resolution for California, it passed in California's Assembly and Senate. So it passed. Now we're looking at how can this now in the next few months, possibly when the Senate committee and Governor Newsom can possibly sign this soon, so we can continue the steps for the full IDA Funding Act bill on a national level. But yeah, that's currently what I'm working on. But there's so much stuff going on that I'm working on. But this is kind of like one of the key things that I'm very passionate about, because I don't mean disability is just an education system, because remember, education system is interconnected to all the systems. Juvenile justice, social welfare, foster youth, all the systems, right? So there can be students with disabilities who are in juvenile justice. So how can this affect and benefit them, because they're also in those settings? How can this affect those in foster youth? How can these affect those in homelessness, if that makes sense? So looking at those larger pictures and really working on that. So another thing that I'm really working on is creating youth councils in Mongolia. So this summer I took on a role to advise Parliament in Mongolia, which I'm doing. It's a role for years, so I'm excited for that. So really working with Parliament of Mongolia and working with organizations there. It's like, how can we create youth councils? Because actually youth councils in Mongolia do not exist like in the United States. In the US, there's so many youth councils, there's so many youth commissions, and so many of these youth roles you could see. But in a country like Mongolia, that's very third world. It's a third world country. youth councils and things like that do not exist. So I'm really working with them. It's like, how can we develop these youth councils in Mongolia, and how can we get youth involved in policy making and Mongolia's legislative system and things like that. So yeah.
What's been the most fulfilling moment in your career, and why does it stand out?
So the most fulfilling moment that I've had in my career, probably when it was my first time giving a speech at a conference. Why? I walked in this conference feeling very scared, feeling very nervous, because it's my first time that I'm speaking in front of 500 people about my lived experiences that I've never done before. I've talked about my lived experiences with people at a table before, but I've never shared my lived experiences with over 500 people in a room. And I was really scared. I was like, I don't want to mess up, but I'm really scared. So I remember breathing, and I remember all, because these 500 people who were in the room today, they weren't just policymakers. These were politicians, these were doctors, these were basically a lot of people. And these were people who build and create systems. I was really nervous, but I remember sharing my lived experiences and leaving that room with applause, with a lot of tears, with happy tears. And I left the audience feeling very hopeful. And a lot of them came up to me and said, thank you for sharing your story, because this reminds us that we have work to do. My story, everything came across to a lot of them. But also to wake them up is that we have more work to do in front of us. There's many youth in front of our lines. There's many youth in front of us that we need to work for, and keep on serving. So and that was a moment that fulfilled me, and that was in 2023, I believe. Yes, 2023, when I first became a student commissioner. I was at a conference called Breaking Barriers of California. But yeah, and now as I go to continue to more conferences and speak at more conferences, I still feel like those moments fulfill. I still fulfill those moments, because those are moments where I continue to leave a everlasting impact. But also, I leave a moment to share that youth can do anything they can, and that their voices do matter. Because when we hear from stories from youth, when we hear them speak, when we are there with them, we learn a lot from each other. We connect with each other. We learn a lot, and we become stronger, and we are more connected. So yeah.
Can you share a moment when you faced a significant challenge and how you overcame it?
Okay, so a significant challenge this is a very good question too. So I think a significant challenge that I've been through is probably like I remember walking in a room with a lot of like policymakers. They were talking about this project basically. And I would go in and I don't know what that is basically, because I'm a young person. And I don't know what that is. But I know it's important. But it's like, what do these abbreviations mean? What do these words mean? Like, what does this mean? You know what I mean? And often that's been a very significant challenge for me. Sometimes I'm walking in spaces where I'm supposed to know things ahead of time. And that's kind of an issue for me, because it's like, but like, you never explained to me what this is. So how am I supposed to know? How am I supposed to be looped in what this is? So like, I'll be often going to spaces where like, there's so many abbreviations and I'm like, I don't know what this is. Because ever since I entered the spaces of policy, education, all these spaces, I've learned that there's so many abbreviations. There's probably like 500 plus abbreviations in like education alone. And learning these abbreviations has been very difficult, because often I don't know these abbreviations, because I realize that in government, we use abbreviations a lot because it's easier. But for me, it was very difficult because I didn't know what these abbreviations are. So learning that, walking into my career, I realized that there's so many things I need to continue to learn about. Abbreviations, languages, how people talk, what different words mean and things like that. So really learning how that goes. And at first, it was a very significant challenge for me, because I didn't know what these were. Like I said, I'm a young person. I'm 18. How am I supposed to know all this? I'm not a mid-year career professional or anything. But now it's becoming easier for me, because now I've heard those abbreviations multiple times. I've learned those words, and I'm learning what they really mean and things like that. So yeah.
The tagline for this podcast is "Empower the leaders of today and tomorrow." What is some advice for anyone trying to be a leader in their own community?
My advice for young people who is listening to this podcast today is that remember that the word impossible is a hoax, because you running for a position, you applying for an internship, you applying for anything, remember it's not impossible, because you can do it. And just because of your age, just because of who you are, doesn't mean it's impossible. And always remember that the word impossible is a hoax. You can do it.
I think all the stories you shared today was very inspirational, and how your disabilities didn't keep you from doing what you want to do. And the fact that you got a full ride to Rice University is very great, actually. And the fact that you're one of the first Mongolian-American appointed person in the government is actually crazy. So, any more information you want to share?
I think that's pretty much it for me today. And thank you both of you for having me today. It's been a pleasure and honor to share my experiences, my passions, my journey, and so much more. So thank you.
Thank you for joining.
Of course.
Your stories are very inspirational.
Well, thank
For
you.
real. So, I think this is it for Voice for You today.
Okay, great. I think I have to wait a little bit because of the file needs to load. The file needs